and welcome to God's Hookups television show. This is Dr. Barbara Young, your host, and this is a show that features up close and personal interviews with guests from all walks of life who share their stories about unexplainable blessings, successful events, and extraordinary miracles and encounters that can only be of God's hookup. You will receive hope, enlightenment, encouragement that will feed your spirit and your soul. Now, to my guest today. Welcome to my guest, Mr. Lavelle Bell. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm about to levitate off this chair. He is an author, musician, minister, and publisher of Noah's Ark Publishing Service. This man is incredible. I've known him for a few years, and it's interesting how paths and how God directs our paths, because never would I have thought I would have you on a show, God's Hookups. He's been a musician, a famous musician, a drummer at that, and he's great. He's had a marvelous life. He's written over 8 books, one that's coming out that we're going to share today, but he's here to talk about his God's hookup story. So viewers, call your friends, tell them to listen and view this show right now because we're streaming live, Facebook and LinkedIn, so they can listen live. Okay, Mr. Lavelle Bell.
Thank you for having me.
I am glad to have you on the show today. You have an incredible story. And one of the things that I was really intrigued about, because as we are going through this pandemic and how God has used you, I mean, really, you've been walking with the Lord for how long?
Oh gosh, over 40 years.
Yep, 40 years. And then during the pandemic, what happened?
A lot of things have happened. 2 that stand out the most. My first book entitled Your Gifts Are Not Your Purpose, the Lord inspired me to go ahead and present that during COVID, because I'm reminded that when we're distracted and when we think things are out of whack, it's good to be reminded while we're on this planet. Our purpose for being here will keep us focused. If we focus on why we're here and why God created us, then everything else will take care of itself. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane had to be reminded. He says, Lord, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. And then he realized it's like, no, not my will, but your will, God. And then those other 3 and 12 disciples woke up. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was to write a book that allows children to express themselves. I think we forget that children are mentally challenged with this very novel experience called COVID-19. So I gathered 50 youth representing 50 states in our United States between the ages of 7 and 13. And they've shared their story, and we put that in a children's anthology. And it's entitled Kids Journal Through COVID-19, United Kids Speak.
Were you inspired? I mean, in essence, you were inspired by God to pull this together with kids.
Absolutely.
Was that something you'd ever thought about, working with children, or?
Somewhat. A year ago or so, a friend of mine came to me from St. Louis, and we put together a children's book just for the city of St. Louis with LeBron James. And if you go on my site, you'll see that book. And we partnered with Ben and Jerry's. And so this time, I thought I would just expand that concept. And God literally gave me all the instructions, Dr. Barbara, every step of the way. And to imagine, the first child's book is Gianna Pink Floyd, the daughter of George Floyd. She has her story in my book.
Wow.
Yes. And it's endorsed by Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson wrote a quote on the back of the book. Tamara Harris, the 2 twins that Tamara, they gave us a quote. It's just an amazing story. It's really amazing. I mean, imagine children sharing their experience about COVID-19. This is their Holocaust.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And the fact that you were able to capture this, and God certainly knows He loves children, suffer little children to come up to me, so that children have this opportunity to express themselves. Did you guys have to edit any of their writing, or did you just let them?
Well, what happened was I identified 50 team leaders around the United States. I have so we had them submit an essay. So when they submitted their essays to the team leader, like in Illinois or like in Missouri, that team leader would in turn send me 5 of the essays, the best essays, and I would pick one out of those 5 essays, and that's how we got them. And then of course, I'm a publisher. I own my own publishing company, Nova's Art Publishing, and I had my editors edit it, and we have like 58 stories because we have a story from a child in Washington D.C., a story from a child in Puerto Rico, and a couple of the kids were twins, and so you couldn't separate twins. But it's pretty amazing. And as you know, Dr. Young, if people are mentally stressed, imagine how the kids are stressed.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I really can't. Don't know how children or parents are dealing with it. Now, I understand these children were between the ages of 17 and 13,
No,
right?
7 and 13.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7 and 13.
Yeah,
And
7,
so
13.
when you think about the age of
The
7,
book is in English. It's in English and Spanish.
okay. Now, did you have a diversity in terms of the children who were writing these essays?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. Uh, the kids are, I mean, we have a child from Utah who's a Mormon. We have a child from Minnesota who's a Muslim. We have children from the Indian reservation of North and South Dakota. Yeah, it's very diverse. We have a special needs child in the state of Washington, and so it's black, white, Asian, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Did you have now? I understand you had this translated into Spanish as well, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
and there's an audiobook. We have an audiobook as well.
And there's an audiobook. Wow. I mean, and I remembered when we talked about this that this is what you call a children's anthology, and
Yeah,
it's written in both Spanish and English. There's an
yeah.
audiobook to it. What did you find that was most compelling out of the stories? And well, let me back up. How were you able to get Gianna Pink Floyd to write the story? How did that happen?
You know, I saw our who looks like he's going to be our president, Vice President Biden, who looks like it's going to be President Biden. He mentioned her that he'd spoken to her and he leaned down and she whispered in his ear, these are her proclamations. She's constantly saying, my daddy, George Floyd, changed the world. And I said, well, boy, if I could just get those words in our anthology, it would be great. One of my friends who is a contact person for me, he reached out to the attorneys and we made the contact. And after making contact, Miss Gianna said she wanted to write more. She offered to write more words. And so when you open up our book, the first story is Gianna Pink Floyd. And so she has her little story there and she's 7 years old. And that's how we got her. She wanted to write. These kids want to express themselves.
Okay. Now, was she expressing herself about the pandemic, about her father's death? Was all of that sort of integrated?
No, very, very interesting. She only shared about the pandemic, and then at the end, she said those words, "My father, George Floyd, changed the world." But just like we treated her just like all the other kids. She expressed her feelings about living during the pandemic, and she shared what she could and could not do. Some of the kids, said they've gotten closer to God. They've expressed their time that they pray more, but it's quite interesting to see the children that are 7 and 8 and the children that are 13 years old, because at 13 years old, they're going into their teenage years. So, yeah.
Were there differences, I'm sure, in terms of age groups of, the 7-year-old writing versus the 12 and 13-year-old? Did you notice a disparity or in terms of the ages and how they wrote their stories?
I was really surprised at how well the younger youth expressed themselves. Our very first writing was from the state of, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. It was so well written that I asked her parent, I said, "You sure your daughter wrote this?" She says, "No, my daughter," she said, "we didn't help her at all." And yeah, but I think I'm taken by the young people, how well, because 7, 8, 9, they're very innocent. So kids say what they really feel. And so, one child in Massachusetts, when she when her mother submitted her essay, the essay was kind of in an interview format.
Mhm.
I thought that was strange, so I reached out to the mother, and she said, "Well, when my son, was born, he didn't have a lung, I think, and they said he probably would never breathe or something, and he wouldn't be able to cry. And so to have him have his story in a kid's anthology, and they were in the homeless shelter. By the way, they're not in that homeless shelter now, but there was no victimization. That was very touching for me.
I'm just intrigued by the whole thing, and I know uh, that my viewers out there are probably intrigued how God inspired you to collect these 50 essays from kids. You know, and I got to get back to this. Lavelle, did you have a voice in the middle of the night? Said, Lavelle, I want you to get this book together for these essays for these young people. How did it come about, really, truly?
Well, it did. This is one project, with all seriousness, that I was 95% inspired by the Spirit. The Lord literally, I have a journal, and in my journal I wrote the date and the time. I would get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. One inspiration inspired divine moment that certainly got my attention that I'll never forget is when he gave me the cover, the idea for the cover. And so I was like, okay, the title of the book is Kids Journey Through COVID-19, United Kids Speak. And I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to so the Lord showed me a map. It was almost like he said, a map, dummy, and then just put the words. And we put a map on the front. He said, create a map on the front and the back. And once my graphic designer created it, I'll screen. But Dr. Young, the Lord literally, I could have never come up with a concept like this. He absolutely gave me every step of the way. I kid you not.
No, I know. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because this show is about the miracle workings of God today. It's not about religion. It's
Yeah.
not about, because people say, well, gee whiz, mysticism. This is about the reality that there is a God.
Yes.
And he is so concerned about this earth. He's concerned about children. He's concerned about you. Some of you out there who are viewing this show, believe me, God is concerned about you. And it's time for you to get on your knees and say, if there is a God. I had one young man on the show, was not on this show, but I said, if you would just say, God, if you are real, show me.
Yes.
I said, that's all I ask you to do.
Yes.
God, if you are real, show me. Because every one of us was brought here with a purpose. He had a purpose, a divine purpose for all of us. And many of us have gotten off course with COVID-19. I'm hoping and trusting that none of you will look in 2021 and look at 2020 and say, I missed my opportunity to make a difference.
Yes.
You will not, because this was given to us as a time to meditate, a time to really go inward, a time to seek God, ask questions. And like you, he gets very prescriptive, does he not?
Absolutely.
Said, a map, dummy.
It was like a map, but you've got to realize my second motivation is to document the moment. This book is a snapshot. I believe 20 years from now that this book, people will be reaching back at the book Kids Journal Through COVID-19, United Kids Speak. Imagine the 58 writers that have written and where they'll be years from now. I'm documenting history. This is their Holocaust. This is their 9/11. Imagine if you were told, Dr. Young, that you went to school one day and you had to go home and you didn't know when you were going to go back to school. Imagine having to graduate from high school virtually. You can't go to church, you have to go to church virtually. I mean, could we do that? I mean, if you go to a store, you've got to have a mask on to go to the grocery store. This is traumatizing to our youth. And if we don't give them a platform to speak, and if we don't show them that there is still a God, even for children at the level that they are. So this is kids carrying the message to each other, saying, because there are some very inspiring stories in the anthology. But the second goal that the Lord inspired me to do is document this moment and allow the kids to speak where they are today. This is history being made. And you're making history having me on this program. This is a history making, we're in the middle of a pandemic that not only im- uh, uh, impacts the century. It impacts the millennium. The millennium. I mean, our world is changing and it will never be the
Yes,
same.
yes, it is. Well, this is a God-inspired idea that God gave me.
Yes.
This is a show, God's Hookups. I had not a clue that hookup had another connotation.
Wow.
Uh, and so, but he definitely said God's hookups. And when I said this to a few friends, they said, I love that title. So as I began to do my research and I found out hookups,
Mm-hmm.
so God said hook up. And I stayed true and brought this show forth starting June 8th.
Wow.
And I can't tell you the incredible stories that men and women have shared. God is still in the miracle working business today. And as I reiterate to those of you out there who maybe don't know him,
Mm.
should get to know him. So I want to get back to the book and where people can get this book. So, Lavelle, tell people where they can get this book.
Kids Journal Through COVID-19, United Kids Speak, is available on Amazon.com and it's available on Kindle. Or you can go to my website, noahsarkpublishing.com. Again, noahsarkpublishing.com, or just my name, Laval Belle. If you Google that name, Lavalbelle, you'll find many things there. And Dr. Young, thank you so much for being such a trailblazer, an innovator, someone that constantly eludes inspiration. I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you. I always have. You know, first time we met, we just clicked because one spirit knows another spirit. They identify and connect. And you certainly have been a blessing. And I did read, and I want you to tell people about the book. I just want to give a plug last minute here. Your gift is not your purpose.
I knew you wouldn't get away on that one.
No, I had to. I just couldn't because when I read that book, it revolutionized my life, and I've been able to share with others to exhort them. Your gift is not your purpose.
Yeah, your gifts are our gifts, plural, are not our purpose.
Right.
That's life changing. I was playing drums with Earth, Wind, and Fire on the road, and I was playing actually with Philip Bailey. We were in Japan, and he asked me to conduct a Bible study, and I'd never conducted one before. And I went to my room and wrote a little outline, and I went to sleep, and I saw these words: "Your gifts are not your purpose." And then my life kind of went before me, and I went, oh my, I've made an idol out of playing the drums, being a musical director. I've literally played the drums with every great artist there is, maybe with the exception of maybe Michael Jackson and Miles Davis. And then I realized that we have a natural gift, a lot of talents, and a spiritual gift, but none of those gifts are our purpose. Those gifts help facilitate our purpose. David was never created to play music. David was created to be king. Nelson Mandela was never created. People forget he was titled a terrorist. He was a lawyer, but his natural gift, he was a boxer. But Nelson Mandela became the president over the very people who imprisoned him for 27 years. What kind of God would do that?
Well, what kind of God is that can take somebody from the backside of the mountain on 80 years of age, and use him to free? And you know, I always love this and studied the life of Moses. God loved Moses.
Oh my God.
He loved Moses.
Moses is my God. You've got to realize that Moses was abandoned at 3 months old. I mean, can you imagine someone putting you in a river and then you grow up in the greatest home in the world, being groomed by Pharaoh, and you've got this fight. He's got this anger problem. To get his attention, God had to have a burning bush, a voice out the bush to get his attention, and the rest is history. Moses didn't begin his ministry until he was 80 years old. 80. Can you believe that? And then his ministry lasted another 40 years. You're never too old. You're certainly never too young, because God called Jeremiah at age 13 years old and said, before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. Meaning, Dr. Young, our purpose and our gifts are here before we get here.
Yes, they are. And so for those listeners out there This has been a show today with Mr. Lavelle Bell. I have to bring him back because I'd like to get into a more discussion about your gifts and your purpose, because I think people really kind of get a little confused with that, and kind of address some of our millennials today, because my heart is really with our young people who are going to be our future,
Yes.
residents and leaders of this country and this world. And so I just want to thank you again for being on the show and the work that you've done, collecting essays from all these beautiful children from all diverse backgrounds, different states, different cultures, from 7 to 13. So this anthology, Kids Journal Through COVID-19, United Kids Speak.
Yeah, we're gonna be in Phoenix, Arizona on the 14th at noon. They can go to my website and get some information.
Okay, Phoenix, Arizona on the 14th, November 14th at noon.
And we are going to be doing book tours with the child and myself in every state.
Oh,
so our next stop is Phoenix, Arizona, the 14th at noon.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for you. God bless you. God's probably got something else next for you, for anthology for 21-year-olds to 25 or something like that. You never know. You never know. So for all of you listeners out there, remember, God is still in the hookup business. And again, if you don't know him, I would advise you to ask to get to know him. So thank you for listening today. And again, I can't thank you enough, Lavelle, for the work that you've done.
Thank you for having me. God bless you. I love you, Dr. Young.
I love you too, with the love of the Lord.
Yeah.
As our pastor says, Bishop Charles Blake, I see you in the future, and you look much better than you do today. So for all you viewers out there, I see you in the future, and you look much better than you do today. So walk in love, keep the faith, and we continue to pray for this country and for the leader, whomever God chooses, because remember, it's God's choice for this country. But you remember, no matter what, we walk in love. So thank you. And I want to say goodbye to all my viewers today. Take care. Have a great weekend. That was great.